The crystalline plague started small, just a few patches of strange glowing crystal on the outer farms of Kethmore Prime. The farmers thought it was beautiful at first. The crystals caught sunlight and threw rainbows across their fields. Then the crystals began to grow. Dr. Vexilani was the first scientist to understand what they were seeing. She stood in her laboratory, watching tissue samples turn to crystal under her microscope. The transformation was perfect, complete, and absolutely terrifying. Organic matter simply stopped being organic. Cells became geometric patterns of silicon and metal. Life became beautiful, lifeless art. "It's not killing the tissue," she whispered to her assistant. "It's changing it, converting it, and it's spreading." Within weeks, entire forests had become crystal gardens. Animals that wandered too close became living statues, their final moments frozen in perfect, gleaming detail. The Kethmori tried everything they knew. They built walls of energy. They created force fields. They used their most advanced weapons to blast the crystal formations. Nothing worked. The plague continued to spread, slow but unstoppable, converting their world piece by piece. The Kethmori were not a young species. They had traveled between stars for thousands of years. Their technology was advanced, their knowledge vast, but they were few in number and physically weak. Their bodies were delicate, their bones fragile. They had always survived through intelligence, not strength. Now intelligence was not enough. "We need help," Elder Korth announced to the Planetary Council. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. "We cannot stop this alone." The decision came quickly. The Kethmori would do something they had never done before. They would ask the galaxy for help. The message took days to compose. It contained everything: detailed scans of the plague, measurements of its spread, biological data, technological specifications. They included their location, their population numbers, their history. They added personal messages from families, from children, from scientists. They poured their entire civilization into a single transmission. "This is Kethmore Prime calling any who can hear us." The message began. "We are dying. Our world is being consumed by something we cannot stop. We have perhaps 6 months before our entire planet becomes crystal. We ask for help. We offer all our knowledge in return. Please, if anyone can hear this, if anyone cares, please help us." The transmission burst out from Kethmore Prime with more power than the planet had ever used before. It raced across space at the speed of light, carrying the desperate plea of an entire species. The Zenthari received the message first. They were a logical species devoted to order and efficiency. Their computers analyzed the Kethmori data in microseconds. The conclusion was clear. The plague was too dangerous, the distance too great, the Kethmori too few. The Zenthari calculated that any rescue mission had an 8.7% chance of success and a 67% chance of spreading the plague to other worlds. Unfortunate. The Zenthari High Command noted in their files, but acceptable losses for galactic stability. The Vextai Collective considered the message next. As a hive mind, their decision was instant and unanimous. The Kethmori plague threatened only individual consciousness. The Vextai, sharing one mind across billions of bodies, saw no real danger. More importantly, the Kethmori had nothing the collective needed. The message reached the Luminari, beings of pure energy who lived in the hearts of stars. They debated for exactly 4.3 seconds before deciding. The Kethmori were solid matter, barely above minerals in the luminary understanding. Their extinction would be like watching rocks crumble. Regrettable, perhaps, but not their concern. One by one, dozens of species received the message. The proud Axoni dismissed it as weakness. The trade-focused Moranti calculated no profit in a rescue mission. The ancient Thekmari, oldest species in the galaxy, had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. What was one more? Each species had their reasons. Each decision was logical, practical, sensible. None of them answered. On a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, the message finally reached Earth. The radio telescopes of the Deep Space Monitoring Network picked up the transmission during a routine scan. At first, the technicians thought it was interference. The signal was too complex, too organized to be natural. Dr. Maria Santos was working the night shift at the Arecibo facility when the computers finished decoding the message. She read the first few lines and called her supervisor. Within an hour, the message was racing through human communication networks. Military commanders, government leaders, scientists, and civilians all heard the same thing. Somewhere in space, people were dying. They had called for help. The human response was immediate and chaotic. Government officials argued about jurisdiction. Military leaders debated strategy. Scientists demanded more data. Religious leaders called for prayer. The media exploded with speculation, but underneath all the noise, something else was happening. Something that would have puzzled every other species in the galaxy. Humans were volunteering. The first ship to volunteer was the cargo vessel New Horizons, captained by Elena Rodriguez. She sent a message directly to the United Nations. "I've got room for 3,000 people and enough supplies for a year. When do we leave?" She was followed by dozens of others. Military ships, research vessels, corporate transports, even private yachts. The owners didn't ask about payment or profit. They didn't calculate odds or debate logic. They just wanted to help. The galactic community watched these transmissions with confusion. The humans were acting against all logic. They were risking everything for strangers they had never met. No other species had ever behaved this way. "Fascinating," noted a Zenthari observer. The humans appear to suffer from a critical flaw in their survival programming. The Vextai Collective was more direct. They will destroy themselves through misplaced empathy. But on Kethmore Prime, as the crystals continued their slow advance toward the last cities, Elder Korth received a transmission that made him weep tears of hope. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We received your message. We're coming to help you. Hold on." For the first time in months, the Kethmori dared to hope. Across the galaxy, someone had heard their call. Someone was coming. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the newly christened Earth Rescue Fleet, watching the controlled chaos around her. 3 weeks ago, she had been planning her retirement. Now she commanded the largest fleet Earth had ever assembled, preparing for humanity's first major deep space mission. The assembly was a miracle of cooperation that stunned the watching galaxy. Ships from every nation had joined the fleet. The American carrier Liberty, the Chinese research vessel Harmony, the Russian heavy transport Soyuz, the European science ship Unity, and dozens of others. Corporate vessels flew alongside military ships. Private yachts sailed next to massive cargo haulers. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Park approached with a tablet. "Final manifest is ready. We have 847 ships total. Military vessels, cargo ships, research ships, medical ships, and..." He paused. "A circus ship." "A circus ship?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "The greatest show, ma'am. They say the animals might help calm the Kethmori children during evacuation." The owner refused to be left behind. Chen shook her head, but she was smiling. Only humans would bring a circus to a rescue mission. The Zenthari monitoring stations observed the human fleet with growing confusion. Their analysis showed critical flaws in the human approach. The ships were poorly matched, their cargo inefficient, their coordination chaotic. No logical species would attempt such a mission. "They have loaded entertainment equipment," reported Scanner Prime Vexthak to the Zenthari High Command. "Musical instruments, art supplies, sports equipment. Their cargo allocation is highly inefficient. Perhaps they do not understand the gravity of the situation," suggested Logic Prime Kurlan the Vexday. Collective shared a different observation across their networked minds. The humans were bringing pets. Dogs, cats, birds, even some exotic animals from their circus ship. No species had ever brought non-essential life forms on a rescue mission. Their emotional attachment to inferior species shows dangerous mental instability, the collective concluded. The Luminari, watching from their stellar observation posts, noted something else entirely. The human ships radiated emotional energy in patterns they had never encountered. Hope mixed with fear, determination blended with uncertainty, and underneath it all something the energy beings had no word for. Dr. James Wright, mission scientist aboard the research vessel Endeavour, was reviewing the Kethmori data for the 100th time when his assistant brought disturbing news. "Sir, we're getting communications from other species. They're warning us to turn back." Wright pulled up the messages. The warnings came from dozens of different civilizations. All said the same thing. The mission was impossible, the plague too dangerous, the humans too weak. The Exoni Empire suggests we preserve our primitive culture while we still can. His assistant read, "The Tekamari sent us a message saying, young species, do not follow the path to extinction." Wright studied the messages. then deleted them all. Log my response, thank you for your concern. We're going anyway. Across the galaxy, the alien response to this message ranged from confusion to outright disbelief. The humans had been warned by species thousands of years older and more advanced. They had been given clear, logical reasons to abandon their mission. They were ignoring all of it. Captain Rodriguez of the New Horizons was dealing with a different kind of problem. Her ship's artificial intelligence was questioning the mission parameters. Captain, the AI's voice was calm and logical. I have completed probability analysis of mission success. Current odds are 12.7% for successful evacuation, 3.2% for stopping the plague, and 84.1% for total mission failure. Noted, Rodriguez replied, not looking up from her coffee. Captain, these odds strongly suggest mission abort would be the logical choice. Rodriguez finally looked up at the AI's camera. Computer, let me explain something about humans. We don't always do the logical thing. Sometimes we do the right thing instead. I do not understand the difference. You will, Rodriguez said. If we survive this, you will. The conversation was monitored by alien intelligence networks throughout the galaxy. The idea that there was a difference between logical and right was a concept that most species found incomprehensible. On Kethmore Prime, the situation was getting worse. The crystal plague had consumed half the planet. Entire cities stood as beautiful, lifeless sculptures. The remaining population had retreated to the northern continent, but the crystals continued their slow advance. Elder Korth received daily updates on the approaching human fleet. The reports were confusing. The humans had suffered multiple mechanical failures, navigation errors, and supply shortages. By all logic, they should have turned back weeks ago. Instead, they kept coming. Their largest ship suffered a reactor breach, reported Communications Officer Veltar. They repaired it with spare parts from 3 different vessels and a technique that violates several laws of physics. Their medical ship was attacked by space pirates, added another officer. They not only fought them off, but convinced 2 pirate ships to join their rescue mission. Korth was silent for a long moment. Are we certain these are the same humans the other species dismissed as primitive? The question was being asked throughout the galaxy. Long-range sensors showed the human fleet in constant crisis. Ships broke down and were repaired with impossible solutions. Crews worked without sleep, pushing their vessels beyond safe limits. Supply ships redistributed resources with no regard for profit or efficiency. It was chaos. It was inefficient. It was completely illogical. It was also working. They're still coming, Veltar reported, wonder in his voice. Despite everything, they're still coming. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship watching the long-range scanners. The Kethmori system was still 3 weeks away, but she could already see the problem. The plague wasn't just on the planet's surface. It was spreading into space, creating crystal formations around the planet like a slowly growing shell. Ma'am, her science officer reported, we're receiving new data from the Kethmori. The plague is accelerating. They have maybe 4 weeks left. Chen did the math in her head. It would be close. Very close. Signal the fleet, she ordered. All ships, maximum burn. If we burn out our engines, we'll figure out how to get home later. The order went out to nearly 900 ships. Every captain received the same message. Push harder, go faster, risk everything. The response was immediate. Engines that were already at maximum thrust somehow found more power. Ships that should have needed maintenance continued running on willpower and spare parts. The human fleet accelerated toward their destination, leaving trails of exotic particles that amazed alien observers. They're exceeding their own technological limits, observed a Zenthari scientist. Their ships should not be capable of this performance. Perhaps, suggested his colleague, their ships are not the limiting factor. Back on Earth, the entire planet watched the mission updates. Cities held prayer vigils. Scientists worked around the clock to provide support. Children sent drawings to be transmitted to the Kethmori. The elderly donated their savings to fund the mission. Humanity had united around a single goal: save the strangers who had called for help. The galaxy watched this phenomenon with growing unease. The humans were displaying behaviors that no advanced civilization had ever shown. They were acting against their own interests. They were taking impossible risks for people they had never met. It made no sense. But somewhere in the darkness between stars, a rescue fleet continued its journey. carrying the hopes of 2 species and the confusion of many others. The universe was about to learn something new about the meaning of humanity. The first disaster hit the human fleet in the Kepler 442 system, still 6 weeks from Kethmore Prime. A massive solar storm erupted without warning, sending waves of radiation and electromagnetic pulses across space. All ships, emergency protocols. Admiral Chen broadcast as alarms screamed across her bridge. Shut down non-essential systems and prepare for... The storm hit before she could finish. Navigation systems fried. Communication arrays overloaded. 12 ships lost main power entirely, drifting helplessly in space. Commander Park pulled up damage reports. Ma'am, we've lost contact with 47 vessels. The medical ship Mercy is reporting total navigation failure. The cargo ship Titan's load has life support problems. The research vessel Darwin is... He paused, checking his screen again. The Darwin is requesting permission to continue with a dead reckoning navigation system they built from spare parts. Chen almost smiled despite the crisis. Permission granted. Signal all ships, we don't leave anyone behind. What followed was a rescue operation within a rescue operation. Ships that still had working systems pulled alongside damaged vessels. Crews worked in vacuum suits, passing cables between ships to share power. Engineers tore apart their own equipment to rebuild navigation systems for other vessels. The cargo ship Mountain Mover lost its entire computer core. Captain Torres and his crew spent 3 days rebuilding a navigation computer using tablets, car GPS units, and a calculator from the ship's rec room. It's not pretty, Torres reported to the fleet, but it'll get us there. The galactic observers watched this with complete confusion. Any logical species would have abandoned the damaged ships and continued with the vessels that still functioned. The humans instead slowed their entire fleet to help the stragglers. They are reducing their efficiency by 34% to accommodate damaged vessels, reported a Zenthari analyst. This behavior serves no logical purpose. The Vextai Collective had a different perspective. They are demonstrating the fatal flaw of individual consciousness. Each unit believes it has value, but the humans kept working. The circus ship Greatest Show shared its emergency food supplies with 3 military vessels whose storage had been contaminated. The luxury yacht Serenity took aboard the crew of a damaged cargo ship, packing people into rooms designed for recreation. Dr. Sarah Kim, chief medical officer of the fleet, worked 18-hour days treating radiation sickness and system failures. Her medical team had expanded to include veterinarians from the circus ship, a dentist from a corporate transport, and a biology teacher whose school ship had volunteered for the mission. We're treating patients with equipment designed for 3 different species, she reported to Admiral Chen. Human, elephant, and dolphin medical scanners are apparently more compatible than anyone expected. 3 weeks later, just as the fleet had recovered from the solar storm, the pirates attacked. The raider fleet was small but well-armed. 12 ships emerging from the shadow of an asteroid belt, targeting the human convoy supply vessels. Their leader, Captain Vextar of the Broken Chain Pirates, had expected easy prey. Human cargo ships, he told his crew over the comm, probably carrying valuable technology. Should be simple. He was wrong. The human response was immediate and coordinated. Military escorts moved to protect the civilian ships, but the civilians didn't just hide and wait for rescue. Cargo ships began emergency maneuvers that should have been impossible for vessels their size. The circus ship somehow managed to launch a cloud of confetti that confused the pirates' targeting systems. What kind of cargo ship carries chaff dispensers? Vextar shouted as his weapons locked onto glittering fragments instead of ships. It's not chaff, his scanner operator replied. It's colorful paper squares. The battle that followed confused every military expert in the galaxy. The humans fought with a combination of standard tactics and complete improvisation. The research ship Einstein used its gravity manipulation equipment as a weapon, pulling 2 pirate ships together until they collided. The medical ship Mercy deployed clouds of healing nanobots that somehow interfered with the pirates' electronics. But the strangest moment came when Captain Rodriguez of the New Horizons opened a direct communication channel to the pirate leader, Captain Vextar, she said calmly while weapons fire flashed around her ship. We're not carrying cargo. We're on a rescue mission. Rescue mission? Vextar's laughter was harsh. Who are you rescuing? The Keth Mori. Their planet is dying. We're going to evacuate them. There was a long pause in the combat. Vextar had heard of the Keth Mori transmission. Every species in the galaxy had heard it. "You're the humans who answered the call," he said slowly. "Yes." Another pause. Around them the battle continued, but something had changed in Vextar's voice. "The Keth Mori saved my daughter once," he said quietly. "Medical research data. Cured a plague that was killing my people. I've been raiding to pay for medicine ever since." Rodriguez made a decision that would have horrified military strategists across the galaxy. "We could use escort ships," she said, "and our medical team might be able to help your daughter." 20 minutes later, the battle ended. Not with the destruction of the pirate fleet, but with 2 pirate ships joining the human convoy as volunteers. The galactic community received this news with complete disbelief. The humans had converted their attackers into allies through conversation. It was unprecedented. "They are either the most naive species in the galaxy," observed a Tekmari elder, "or the most dangerous." The convoy continued, now larger than before. But the disasters weren't over. In the Wolf 359 system, a cascade failure in the main supply ship's fusion reactor contaminated 3 months of food supplies. In the Ross 128 system, a navigation error sent 15 ships 3 days off course. Each crisis should have ended the mission. Each time the humans found a way to continue. When food ran short, crews began sharing personal supplies. Families on the civilian ships gave up their favorite meals. The circus animals were put on strict diets, and somehow their trainers made it seem like a game. When ships ran low on fuel, the cargo vessels shared their reserves. When the cargo vessels ran low, the military ships shared theirs. When everyone was running on empty, an engineering team on the Prometheus figured out how to convert waste products into fuel using a process that violated several conservation laws. "It shouldn't work," Dr. Wright reported to Admiral Chen. "According to physics, it can't work, but somehow it does." The aliens watching the convoy couldn't understand what they were seeing. Ship after ship should have been abandoned. The mission should have failed a dozen times over. Instead, the humans kept adapting, improvising, and moving forward. "They are using techniques that do not exist in our databases," reported a Zenthari observer. "Their engineering appears to be based on optimism rather than physics." On Kethmore Prime, the crystals had consumed 80% of the planet. The remaining population had crowded into the last few cities, watching the slow advance of beautiful, deadly transformation. Many had given up hope, but Elder Korth continued to broadcast updates to the approaching human fleet. "The crystals reached the outer districts of New Keth today," he reported. "We estimate 18 days before they reach the population centers. But we are ready. We have prepared evacuation sites. We have gathered our most important cultural artifacts. We wait for you." The message reached Admiral Chen as her fleet finally entered the outer edge of the Keth Mori system. Her ships were battered, improvised, and running on fumes. Half of them shouldn't have been able to fly. Her crews were exhausted, worried, and down to emergency rations. But they had made it. "This is Admiral Chen to all ships," she broadcast. "We can see the Keth Mori homeworld. We can see the crystal formations. We are 18 days ahead of total planetary conversion." She paused, looking at the impossible sight before them. "Let's bring them home." Across the galaxy, civilizations that had dismissed the human mission as impossible watched long-range sensors detect the battered human fleet arriving at Kethmore Prime. Against all odds, against all logic, against the predictions of every advanced species in the galaxy, humanity had answered the call. Now came the hard part. The sight of Kethmore Prime took Admiral Chen's breath away. The planet hung in space like a jewel, but it was the wrong kind of beautiful. Vast sections of the world sparkled with crystalline formations that caught and reflected starlight. The crystal growth formed patterns across the surface that were mathematically perfect and utterly lifeless. "My God," whispered Dr. Wright from the science station. "It's gorgeous and terrifying." "How much of the planet?" Chen asked. 82% crystal conversion, Lieutenant Park reported. "The remaining population is concentrated in 3 cities on the northern continent. We're detecting approximately 2.3 million life signs." Chen opened a channel to the Keth Mori. "This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Rescue Fleet. Elder Korth, we've arrived." The response came immediately, and the relief in the alien voice was unmistakable. "Admiral Chen, we cannot believe you are here." After so many said no, after so many turned away. "We're here," Chen said simply. "Let's get your people to safety." What followed was the largest evacuation in galactic history. Human ships descended toward Kethmore Prime in carefully coordinated waves. The cargo vessels went first, landing in the open areas around the Kethmori cities. Their crews began setting up temporary shelters and processing centers. The aliens watching from across the galaxy expected the humans to begin immediate evacuation. Instead, something unexpected happened. Dr. Kim and her medical team went straight to the Kethmori hospitals. The alien doctors were confused when the humans began treating not just evacuation injuries, but diseases and conditions that had nothing to do with the crystal plague. "Why are you fixing my grandson's broken arm?" asked Dr. Vexilani, the Kethmori scientist who had first identified the plague. "We are fleeing for our lives." "Because he has a broken arm," Dr. Kim replied as if the answer was obvious. "We're doctors. We fix broken arms." The circus ship Greatest Show set up its equipment in the main refugee center. Children who had spent months in terror watched in amazement as human performers juggled, danced, and made balloon animals. The circus animals, carefully quarantined but visible, became a source of wonder for young Kethmori, who had never seen Earth creatures. They brought entertainment, reported a Zenthari observer. In the middle of a planetary evacuation, they brought entertainment for the children. But the most important work was happening in the temporary laboratories. Dr. Wright and his team were working around the clock with Kethmori scientists, studying the crystal plague from samples that were far too dangerous for any sane being to handle. "The crystalline matrix is unlike anything in our databases," Dr. Vexilani explained. "It converts organic matter at the molecular level. We have tried everything: plasma bombardment, quantum disruption, dimensional phasing. Nothing stops it." Dr. Wright studied the samples through multiple layers of containment. "What about biological approaches?" "Biological approaches?" Vexilani was confused. "The plague is not biological. It is a quantum crystalline phenomenon." "Maybe," Wright said. "But look at the growth patterns." He pulled up a holographic display showing the plague spread across the planet. The patterns were beautiful, but Wright's human eyes saw something different. "This looks like fungal growth to me," he said. "Mycelial networks. The way it spreads, the way it connects. Have you tried treating it like a biological infection?" The Kethmori scientist stared at him. That is impossible. The plague operates on a quantum level. So do viruses, technically," Wright replied. "Want to try something crazy?" What happened next horrified every advanced species monitoring the situation. The humans began treating the quantum crystalline plague like a biological infection. They synthesized antifungal compounds. They created biological agents designed to disrupt organic networks. They approached a quantum phenomenon with biochemistry. It was scientifically absurd. It violated fundamental principles. It couldn't possibly work. It worked. "The crystalline growth has stopped advancing," reported Dr. Vexilani, staring at her instruments in disbelief. "The biological agents are somehow interfering with the quantum matrix, but stopping the plague was only part of the solution. The humans also had to reverse the damage, and for that, they needed to do something even more impossible. They had to repair quantum crystallized organic matter. Chief Engineer Martinez of the Prometheus was the one who figured it out. She was working with a team of Kethmori technicians, trying to understand their quantum manipulation technology. "This equipment is amazing," she said, studying a crystalline formation device. "But you're using it to try to reverse the process directly." "Yes," replied Engineer Kolthek. "We attempt to convert the crystal back to organic matter. But the quantum patterns are too stable." Martinez looked at the device, then at the crystal samples, then at the device again. "What if we don't try to reverse it? What if we work with it?" She began modifying the Kethmori equipment in ways that horrified the alien engineers. She bypassed safety systems, overrode stability protocols, and connected devices that were never meant to work together. "This will cause a cascade failure," Kolthek warned. "The quantum matrix will become unstable." "Exactly," Martinez grinned. "We're going to make the crystals want to change back." What she created was a device that should have exploded. Instead, it sent carefully modulated quantum pulses into the crystalline formations. The pulses didn't try to force the crystal back into organic matter. They made the crystal formations unstable enough to accept biological reconstruction agents. It was elegant, impossible, and completely insane. It worked. The first test was on a small crystal garden that had once been a Kethmori flower bed. The combined human-Kethmori team activated the device, then introduced biological reconstruction agents. The crystals began to dissolve. Not destructively, but gradually, gently. Where perfect crystal formations had stood, organic matter began to reappear. Not exactly the same as before, but alive again. "It's working," breathed Dr. Vexilani. "The quantum biological approach is actually working." News of the breakthrough spread across the galaxy at light speed. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitively illogical now watched in confusion as those same primitives solved a problem that had stumped the most advanced civilizations. "How are they doing this?" demanded the Zenthari High Command. "Their approach lacks scientific foundation," replied Logic Prime Kurlan, "yet it produces results." The Vextai Collective shared a different concern across their networked minds. If primitive species can succeed where advanced species failed, what does this mean for the nature of advancement? But on Kethmor Prime, the impossible was becoming routine. Human engineering teams worked alongside Kethmori technicians to modify the quantum reconstruction devices for planetary use. Human doctors treated Kethmori patients using medical techniques that combined Earth biology with alien technology. Human circus performers kept Kethmori children entertained while their world was literally rebuilt around them. The evacuation continued, but now it had a different purpose. Instead of fleeing a dying world, the Kethmori were being relocated temporarily while their planet was healed. "We can save about 60% of the original ecosystem," reported Dr. Wright. "The quantum biological reconstruction can't restore everything perfectly, but it can bring the planet back to life." Elder Korth stood in the command center of the human flagship, watching real-time images of his world. Crystal formations were dissolving across entire continents. Green was returning to the landscape. Water was beginning to flow again. "Why?" he asked Admiral Chen. "Why did you come when no one else would?" Chen was quiet for a moment, watching the planet heal. "Because you asked for help," she said finally. But the other species had logical reasons not to come. The distance, the danger, the odds of failure. "They were probably right," Chen admitted. "This mission should have been impossible." "Then why did you try?" Chen smiled. "Because sometimes impossible just means no one's tried hard enough yet." Across the galaxy, advanced civilizations struggled to understand what they were witnessing. The humans had succeeded where logic said they should have failed. They had solved problems using methods that shouldn't have worked. They had saved a species that everyone else had written off as doomed. And they had done it all for one simple reason: because someone had asked for help. The universe was learning that sometimes the most advanced response to a problem isn't the most logical one. Sometimes it's just the most human one. 6 months after the human fleet arrived at Kethmor Prime, the impossible had become reality. The crystal plague was not just stopped, it was reversed. Vast sections of the planet that had been lifeless crystal formations were now green with returning vegetation. Cities that had been beautiful, frozen sculptures were bustling with life again. Elder Korth stood in his rebuilt office, looking out at a view that had been Crystal Garden just weeks before. Now it was a park where Kethmori children played alongside human children from the rescue fleet. The sight still amazed him. "The final count, Elder," reported Communications Officer Veltar. 2.34 million Kethmori successfully evacuated and returned. Planetary ecosystem restoration at 73% and improving. The quantum biological reconstruction systems are functioning beyond all projections. Korth nodded, but his attention was on something else. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy, and they all told the same story. The universe was talking about what the humans had done. The Zenthari High Command had issued their first official statement acknowledging that their logical calculations had been incomplete. The Vextai Collective was experiencing something their hive mind had never encountered before. Individual voices within the collective asking why they hadn't helped. But the most significant change was in the galactic communication networks. Species that had ignored the Kethmori distress call were now studying human behavior patterns. Military academies were adding human tactical approaches to their curricula. Scientists were trying to understand how emotion-driven decision-making could produce superior results. Admiral Chen was preparing for departure when the first new distress call came in. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park approached with a concerned expression. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim, the Velkari system." Chen looked up from her reports. What's the situation? Stellar engineering disaster. A solar array project has gone wrong. The star is destabilizing. When it goes supernova, it'll destroy 3 inhabited planets and 4 space stations. Estimated death toll, 14 million across 5 different species. Chen felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. How long do they have? 6 weeks, maybe 7. And the galactic response? Park's expression said everything. The Velkari sent their distress call to every major species in the galaxy. The Xanthari say the project is too complex to fix safely. The Exoni Empire claims it's outside their territory. The Thekamari suggest evacuating to uninhabited worlds. None of them are helping? No, ma'am, but Park paused. The distress call specifically requests human assistance. Chen stared at him. They're asking for us specifically. Yes, ma'am. The message says we have heard of human capabilities. We request immediate assistance from Earth Defense Force. We know you answer when others will not. Admiral Chen looked around the bridge of her flagship. Her crew was exhausted. Their ships were barely operational after the Kethmori mission. They had used up most of their supplies and pushed their technology far beyond safe limits. She thought about Earth, still weeks away. She thought about her planned retirement, the quiet life she had been looking forward to. She thought about 14 million people who were about to die. Signal the fleet, she said quietly. All ships prepare for immediate departure to the Velkari system. Ma'am, Park said carefully, the crew needs rest. The ships need repairs. Command back on Earth is expecting us home. Chen looked at him with a slight smile. Park, how long have you been serving with humans? 12 years, Admiral. Then you know what our answer is going to be. Park nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. I'll send the signal. Across the fleet, the response was immediate. Tired crews began preparing for another impossible mission. Engineers started planning repairs that would have to happen during travel. Medical teams calculated how to stretch their remaining supplies. The circus ship Greatest Show sent a message. We still have animals to entertain traumatized children. Ready to depart. Captain Rodriguez of the New Horizons was more direct. My cargo holds are empty. My engines are held together with spare parts and prayer, and my crew hasn't slept properly in weeks. When do we leave? The galactic community watched this development with something approaching awe. The humans hadn't even returned home from their first rescue mission before accepting a second one. It defied all logic, all precedent, all common sense. They are operating beyond rational parameters, observed a Xanthari analyst. This behavior pattern suggests either severe mental deficiency or, he paused, struggling with the concept, a fundamentally different approach to survival. The Thekamari elders, oldest species in the galaxy, held an unprecedented emergency council. For the first time in their million-year history, they were reconsidering their policy of non-interference. The young species acts without logic, observed Elder Prime Tekmala, yet their actions produce outcomes that our logic deemed impossible. Perhaps, suggested Elder Kolveth quietly, logic is not the only form of intelligence. The human fleet departed Kethmor Prime with a farewell that would be remembered for generations. The entire Kethmori population gathered to watch their rescuers leave. Children threw flowers that drifted in the low gravity. Adults sang traditional songs of gratitude that had never been sung for off-worlders before. Elder Korth transmitted a final message to Admiral Chen. We will never forget. When the galaxy remembers courage, it will speak your name. But the most significant moment came as the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. Long-range communications detected something unprecedented. Other species were mobilizing to help with the Velkari crisis. Admiral, reported the communications officer, we're detecting fleet movements throughout the galaxy. The Xanthari are dispatching engineering specialists. The Exoni are sending construction vessels. Even the Luminari are offering energy manipulation assistance. Chen smiled. They're not coming to help the Velkari. They're coming to help us help the Velkari. She was right. For the first time in galactic history, multiple species were coordinating a joint humanitarian mission. Not because logic demanded it, not because they would profit from it, but because they had seen what happened when someone actually answered a call for help. As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading toward another impossible mission, they left behind more than just a saved world. They had changed something fundamental in how the galaxy thought about itself. The Kethmori began broadcasting their own message to the stars, telling the story of the species that came when no one else would. The message spread from system to system, translated into hundreds of languages, shared across networks that spanned the galaxy. On Earth, the story of the Kethmori rescue became legend, but more importantly, it became precedent. When the next call for help came from a species in distress and the next, humanity always answered. The galaxy learned a new word, translated into every language: hope. But humanity had taught the universe something even more important. They had shown that the most advanced response to suffering wasn't always the most logical one. Sometimes the most advanced response was simply the most compassionate one. Years later, when galactic historians studied this period, they would mark it as the beginning of a new era, not because humanity had the best technology or the strongest military or the most advanced science, but because humanity had answered when everyone else said no, and in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy what it meant to be truly civilized. The rescue fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying hope toward another crisis, another impossible mission, another chance to prove that the best of humanity wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their refusal to let others suffer alone. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display showing 14 million lives at risk and said the words that had become humanity's calling card across the galaxy. "We're coming to help you. Hold on." The galaxy had learned to listen for those words. They meant that somewhere in the universe someone still cared enough to answer when others called for help. They meant that hope was on the way.